People who never complain say, "It's fine," so many times that, eventually, everyone around them actually starts to believe it. Someone who rarely complains is usually seen as easygoing, easy to be around, the kind of person who never makes things complicated. And a lot of the time, that's true. But underneath that calmness, there's a question that almost never completely goes away. Does anyone actually know when something bothers them? These people aren't oblivious to annoying little things, and deep down, they know that. A rude comment, a line that barely moves, plans falling apart at the last minute. They notice all of it. They just don't automatically hand over their attention and energy to it. From the outside, they look exactly the same: calm, quiet, fine. So let's understand what's really happening. Someone cuts them off in traffic without signaling, nearly causing an accident. The more common reaction would be to spend the next 20 minutes replaying what happened, maybe telling someone about it just to hear, "Yeah, that was ridiculous." But for someone who rarely complains, the irritation might last a few seconds, and then it's gone. Not because they didn't feel anything, because they decided not to keep it going. There's a certain logic behind this, almost like a calculation they were never formally taught but somehow learned to do in their head. Complaining about something that's already happened means continuing to pay for it. A rude comment lasts 20 seconds in the real world, but it can last 2 hours inside someone's mind if they keep replaying it, dwelling on it, retelling the story to every person they come across. Suddenly, the problem gets to live much longer inside the mind than it ever did in reality. People who rarely complain seem to understand this almost instinctively. Why give another 2 hours of your attention to someone who irritated you for 20 seconds? The Stoic philosopher Epictetus taught that some things are within our control and others aren't, and that much of human suffering comes from trying to control what was never ours to control in the first place. Rain ruins the plans. Traffic comes to a standstill. A stranger was rude, and you'll probably never see them again. It happened, it's over, and you can't undo it. So the same question comes up again. Why keep giving your attention to something that's already finished? That doesn't mean quietly putting up with everything. Accepting what can't be changed is very different from accepting something that could actually be resolved through a conversation, and that distinction will matter later. For now, it's worth recognizing what's genuinely valuable about this behavior. Choosing your battles takes a kind of self-control that a lot of people never develop. Not reacting to every little provocation, not allowing some random stranger to decide your mood for the rest of the day. That's perspective. But there's something almost nobody notices about this behavior. And this is where the story starts to change. There's a problem with becoming too good at letting things go. The people around you may have no idea which things you didn't actually let go of. From the outside, the response always looks the same. "It's fine. No problem. Forget about it." But behind those exact same words, there can be two completely different experiences. Sometimes it's true. It really doesn't matter anymore, and they've already forgotten about it. But sometimes, that's not what's happening at all. It bothered them. Maybe it even hurt. They just decided not to make room for a conversation about it. And from the outside, there's almost no way to tell the difference. Which leads to a question you may have never asked yourself before. Do you stay quiet because something isn't worth your energy? Or because, somewhere along the way, you learned that your feelings aren't worth taking up space? Because sometimes the complaint doesn't actually disappear, it just becomes silent. On the outside, no problem. On the inside, of course I'm the one dealing with this again. On the outside, it's fine. On the inside, why does this person always do this to me? There's no conflict happening on the outside, but internally, an entire conversation may be running in the background, over and over again, without anyone else even knowing it's there. And over time, things like that have a way of piling up, taking on one more favor. Sure, I'll handle it. And then, later, alone, thinking, why does this always end up falling on me? Someone crosses a boundary that was never actually said out loud. It's okay. And then, little by little, a distance starts to grow that nobody can quite explain. Sometimes resentment builds around needs the person hoped others would notice on their own without ever having to ask. For a lot of people who rarely complain, there's a very real desire to be understood without having to explain everything. A thought that almost never gets said out loud. If this person really knows me, they should notice. If I have to ask someone to be considerate, then somehow, it doesn't feel like consideration anymore. They don't want to say, I'm exhausted. Can you help me? They wish someone would simply look at them and say, "You've already done enough. Let me take care of this." And that's where a very human contradiction shows up. Someone can become incredibly good at hiding what they feel, while also becoming deeply frustrated that nobody notices. But there may be an uncomfortable truth buried underneath all of this. Someone asked, "Are you okay?" The answer was yes. Someone asked, "Do you need help?" The answer was, "No, I've got it." After years of training people to believe those answers, it becomes hard to blame them for not seeing something that was never shown. There's a reason handling everything alone can feel safer than asking for help. If you complain, you start hoping the other person will change. If you ask for help, you have to depend on someone actually showing up. And there's always the possibility of hearing no. Doing it yourself removes that uncertainty completely. Sometimes independence doesn't mean, "I don't need anyone." It means, "I don't want my peace to depend on someone else's answer." And this is exactly where another familiar role comes in, being the strong one. The person who handles their own problems, listens to everyone else's, notices when someone seems off, helps before anyone even has to ask. But when someone finally turns the question around and says, "What about you? Are you okay?" the answer comes out almost automatically, "I'm fine. What about you?" And once again, the conversation moves somewhere else. There's real pride in that. Being able to tolerate discomfort without falling apart is a genuine skill. But there's a difference between having that strength available when you need it and feeling like you have to prove that strength all the time, to everyone, without exception. Being strong is a skill. Feeling like you always have to look strong can become a prison. For some people, not complaining is also about protecting an image, always looking in control, never visibly shaken. A difficult meeting ends, their face still looks calm, while internally, they're replaying every sentence they wish they had said. In those cases, the silence isn't really about choosing your battles. It comes from the fear that reacting might reveal vulnerability. Someone is rude during a quick conversation. The response is a simple, "It's fine, no problem," followed by a polite smile. They walk away, but hours later, that moment is still being reconstructed in their mind, almost like a replay nobody asked to watch. Psychologist James Gross, one of the leading researchers in emotion regulation, describes something that helps explain this. Stopping yourself from showing an emotion is not the same thing as being done processing it. His research has shown that suppressing emotional expression during an interaction can continue to demand mental effort even after the conversation itself is over. In other words, the face can stop showing something long before the mind has actually finished dealing with it. There's also a line of research on what psychologists call self-silencing, the habit of holding back thoughts, needs, or feelings, usually to avoid conflict or protect a relationship. A 2021 review that brought together 42 studies and more than 10,000 participants found a moderate association between this pattern and depressive symptoms. It's important to be precise here. That does not mean staying quiet causes depression, and it certainly isn't enough to diagnose anyone. The distinction that matters is something else. Choosing your battles and systematically erasing your own needs are not the same thing, even if, from the outside, they can look almost identical. The person doesn't want to be a burden, so they don't say they're struggling. The people around them believe everything is fine, so they don't offer help. Sometimes, they're not failing to help because they don't care. They simply believed the version of you that always says, "I'm fine." The problem with almost never complaining is that no one realizes you're reaching your limit until you've already pulled away. And there may be an even bigger trap hidden inside that. The person believes they're avoiding conflict one situation at a time, protecting their peace. But in reality, they may just be postponing all of those conflicts until one single moment. The moment when there's no desire left to fix anything. And this is where the question starts to change. Because maybe this was never really about whether someone complains or not. Maybe it's about something much simpler and much more uncomfortable. How much of you can people actually know when the answer is always, "I'm fine"? Someone can spend years by your side and still never really know what bothers you, what hurts you, not because they don't care, but because you never gave them access to that information. And giving someone access doesn't mean complaining about everything. Sometimes it just means telling the truth instead of choosing the version that's easier for everyone to swallow. None of this means complaining less is a problem. It simply means there's a difference between two things that can look exactly the same from a distance. Accepting what genuinely cannot be changed, and repeatedly tolerating something that actually deserved a conversation. Real maturity isn't never complaining, and it isn't pointing out every tiny irritation that happens throughout the day either. It's knowing the difference. What deserves to be forgotten, what deserves to be accepted, and what deserves to be said before it turns into distance that nobody ever saw coming. Keep choosing your battles. Keep letting small things stay small. Just don't become so good at letting things go that the people who truly matter to you never find out when something actually hurts. If this video made sense to you, leave your thoughts in the comments. Say whatever comes to mind as honestly as you can, and don't forget to subscribe to Everyday Mind. Here, you'll keep learning more about human psychology, behavior, and the habits that shape the way we live. See you in the next one.